There's something weird on my screen. What is that about? Let me get rid of that. Sorry. AIPAC, which until this week wasn't really a pack, is now a pack or has packs? Packs of what? Hey, everybody. Oh, Rabbi Litwak, you're going to have to help me with this. For years, AIPAC was, to me, a pack. And now I learn that now they have packs. There has been a pretty monumental shift, I think, in the way one of the... I didn't say hello to anyone, but sorry, I just jumped right in. Because
we're so excited about this topic.
I don't know if we're excited or terrified by it. But, I mean, it really is a monumental shift in one of the largest, most powerful organizations. Pro-Israel lobby organizations. And I would say, by the way, having been, I know you have also, to a number of their conferences, I mean, just... the ability to bring together 18,000 pro-Israel people, forget politics, forget anything else that they do. That alone is huge. So this monumental organization which has always been bipartisan, which has never funded specific candidates, just announced that they're going to do exactly that. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about how we imagine they might determine which political candidates they want to back. How do you decide who is pro-Israel or who is not? Opening statements, Rabbi Litwak.
Well, as I said, I'm really excited about this topic because I think it's a topic that we think about almost reflexively, and yet we don't dive in and really ask that question that we posed, which is what makes a politician pro-Israel or not. The fact that AIPAC is choosing to...
Rabbi Litwak, hold on one second. Marty Oppenheimer, who's my favorite person in the world, just told us that you're echoing, and that is my fault. And now, Marty Oppenheimer, it should be better. I apologize, Rabbi. Go for it.
Coming right back. This is a question that we or a topic that we've dealt with. We don't even deal with it. It's sort of reflexive. And so to ask the question, as I imagine AIPAC will need to do, is this person pro-Israel or not, is really an interesting question. And the more I spent time thinking about it and trying to test my theories and study, really, I'm just excited about answering the question. So
before we do that, can I ask a different question?
Sure.
Why do you think AIPAC did this now? Has something changed that is making having PACs a more appealing idea for an organization that for however many years it's been around has never had them?
Well, I think that the landscape has changed, and I think that as much as we'd like to think otherwise, money talks, and so Israel or AIPAC has always been a pro-Israel lobbying, and their additional arm, their educational arm, has been all about helping people understand Israel and its complexity and its beauty. But in order for them to do their work, I think that they realize that they've got to put money in the hands of politicians who are looking for it.
Where had they been spending money in the past if they weren't giving it to candidates?
I don't know. Truthfully, this is conjecture on my part. I think a lot of it was helping people understand, educating people. Um, that it's well known that many Democrats and Republicans cross the aisle would go on these educational
Right, the
trips.
Israel
Um,
trips, yeah.
and help people understand what's going on, sort of on the ground in Israel,
Yep.
um, helping uh, people understand where's technology and where's medicine and where all of these industries. How do we encourage people to? How do we encourage the government to support Israel through security and other issues that are important to Israel?
Great. All right, so let's dive into it then. So, I will list a group of different lawmakers, and you tell me if they are pro-Israel or not, and
Oh, I
and
can't do
why.
that. I can't do that.
Right. Well, let me just throw some
All right,
names out for people to think about, and then we can, of course, talk more broadly. Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, Rashiba Tlaib, from Michigan, Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona, who's a member of the House Republican Israel Caucus. How about Rand Paul, who apparently just blocked $2 billion of funding for Iron Dome? Former President Trump, who many claimed was the greatest friend of Israel ever, who just implied that Mr. Netanyahu should, f off or whatever. How do we decide that politicians are either for or not for the state of Israel in the way we want them to be?
right. So here's my opening thoughts. I think that there are going to be three things that I want to talk about, right? And in some way, and I think we'll probably come to this. I'm coming from an American standpoint, but I'm also trying to, as somebody who loves Israel and who spent a lot of time in Israel, I want to think about how Israelis might see whether somebody is pro-Israel or not. I think there could be a difference there. So let
As
me,
I remember, a lot of Israelis loved President Trump.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think that there are things that would define him as pro-Israel
Yep.
that we could point to. So probably the first is going to be the notion of taking Israel's concerns around security seriously. Okay? It's the expectation that I would have of a politician is that um, they're going to listen to what Israel is thinking about and feeling. They don't have to agree. I mean, I think we can look at Iran, and there's plenty to discuss whether we should go this way or go that way. But Israel sees, right, and I happen to agree, but I can understand that people may not, that Iran is an existential threat to Israel's security. And so, therefore, for somebody to be pro Israel, I think they need to be able to hear Israel's concerns. We don't need people. We don't need the United States. And I shouldn't. I guess I'm speaking in terms of Israel. Israel doesn't need the United States to paternalistically take over Israel's security concerns according to American needs. I think it is, and this is going to be on the surface of what I want to get to shortly. I think it is recognizing that Israel has concerns, particularly around security, and that somebody has to take those seriously, has to listen and hear that. That's the first thing. The
Can I can
second,
I just can I just add, Rabbi, that as you were talking about Iran, I started to think back to when there were raging debates about the release of all that money, and how AIPAC took a really strong stand against that, and other people were in favor of it. And it seems to me that what you're saying is you don't have to being in favor of the peace treaty with Iran, not peace treaty, the what was it?
joint, yeah, the
Whatever,
joint agreement.
yeah, the agreement. Being in favor of that or being against it, neither of those is a litmus test saying that you support Israel. The key piece, it seems to me, based on what you just said, is understanding that Israel has the right to be for or against that
Yes,
agreement.
and taking that seriously and being willing to really hear. Okay, and this is, so I said it was going to go a little bit deeper, because I think that the willingness to hear Israel's concerns, and I'm labeling security kind of separately, but there are lots of Israel's concerns, has a a second litmus test or a second precondition, and that is to have a profound friendship with Israel, right? That when there is friendship with Israel, Israel's concerns become important. Right? Again, it doesn't require a politician to agree with Israel 100% of the time. Right? The truth is that in the Knesset, right, there isn't 100% agreement all the time. Why would we hold American politicians to a standard that we don't hold for Israelis, or for that matter, even the wider Jewish community? The wider Jewish community doesn't all agree on this. Okay? That we can have disagreement but still be pro-Israel. Okay? And so that profound friendship, and I want to be careful that the that the profound friendship is not love. Okay? Love, people say I love Israel, and I love Israel, but I want to be careful about that, because I think that if we love Israel too much, there's a potential for idealization, right? That we are holding Israel to a higher or an unrealistic expectation. And then when Israel doesn't meet our expectation, then there's going to be disappointment. Okay? I don't need uh, I don't need American politicians, to be in lockstep with Israel, to love them in the way I unconditionally love my wife. Right? I, but right, I want them to have that deep friendship that says, I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to care, even if American politicians, as they should, are going to keep American priorities and interests first. Right? So that's the second thing. All right, a deep friendship. Okay? The third thing, and I've alluded to it, is not to idealize Israel. Right? Because that idealization, right, has the potential to create a double standard for Israel. Right? That we hold Israel up in ways that are unrealistic. So my three sort of preconditions, okay, and you can see there isn't a specific litmus test. Okay? The three: take Israel's security concerns seriously, have a profound friendship with Israel, and then not to idealize the state.
That all okay. But what about the brass tacks, right? What about funding Iron Dome? What about supporting particular Israeli politicians, right? If there is a perception that a U.S. politician is either friendlier or less friendly to a particular Israeli politician, the prime minister, is that not evidence of the U.S. politician deserving or not deserving our support? Should they not show unyielding fidelity to the Israeli government? Or is it okay to say, no, that's not okay. That's not right. The choices they're making.
Look, I think my pro-Israel credentials are pretty solid. I'm going to feel pretty good about that, right? And yet, I don't think that I'm saying anything out of turn or anything surprising for anybody who has ever listened to me. That I had deep disagreements with the previous prime minister, Prime Minister Netanyahu. Okay, that didn't mean that I didn't support him, support at the same time that I was saying to him, I am your friend. And as your friend, I'm going to tell you, because I'm your friend, that I think you are doing something wrong. That's what friends do. Okay. And if we are not speaking to Israel as our friend, okay, and asking them to be better in the same way as I would expect others to ask us to be better, then that's not the deep friendship. There isn't a deep friendship there.
So
So
there are lots of U.S. politicians who call Israel out pretty regularly. I mean, I think
yeah,
Elon.
Ilhan, yeah, Omer. Yeah.
Thank you. Forgive me for destroying her name. I think she's perhaps a bit of a radical example, but a lot of the arguments that she makes, a lot of other politicians are making, and they are branded as anti-Israel.
Yeah, because I think that they don't. I think that they don't hit the other two. Right?
What do you mean?
Meaning that they don't take Israel's security concerns seriously.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
They're willing,
So it's a package deal. Yeah.
and they idealize Israel and hold Israel to standards that they don't hold the Palestinians to. Right? So if it is purely one-sided that says Israel is the aggressor, and there's no discussion about whether Palestinian terrorism in some way plays a role in any of this, then that's not pro-Israel.
Right.
Right?
So what do you do with a Rand Paul who says, I don't know what he says. I certainly, I'm not qualified to put words in his mouth, but let me suggest what I think he might be thinking. I'm not sure that he has a problem with supporting Israel. I'm not sure that he has an issue with the Jewish state. I think that he doesn't feel like America should be sending all of our money overseas. And I'm not sure I disagree with him entirely. So what it is, can he still be pro-Israel even when he says, no, we're not giving $2 billion to someone else. Look at all the problems we have at home. Don't we have to put our own oxygen mask on first before we can help others?
Yes, I think that there is something to that idea. I think that I too don't know enough about Rand Paul's politics or his beliefs about Israel. So I feel a little unqualified as well. But where I guess where I'd like for him to land is that, and maybe we'll get to this, that I want politicians to be pro-Israel by going out on a limb. Okay, uh, there's I learned this from my teachers at Hartman, and Alana Stein-Hain, who's I think the dean of faculty for Hartman, um, talked about a text. She brought in a text from Talmud Yevamot about the laws of conversion. And she said the text says that when somebody comes to convert, the Beit Din, the clergy court, asks, what did you see that motivated you to convert? Okay, don't you know that the Jewish people are at the present time are despised, and they're attacked, and they're harassed, and there are difficulties. All right, and if the convert says, I know, but I'm still not worthy, okay, the court is supposed to accept that person immediately. Okay, and what Alana Stein-Hain talked about is that if you want to be pro-Israel, right, you need to be able to say, warts and all, I identify with this group, even though it means that there are going to be people who are going to attack me for it, right? Or I can't be in places that I used to be. Okay, so in some way, I want people to understand and identify with the Jewish people and with Israel, even if it impacts them in a negative way, right? And then, okay, um, the text goes on to say that once you accept them, you're supposed to teach some of the easier mitzvot, some of the harder mitzvot, right? And in this case, right, what is that telling us, or what is that teaching us? It's that if you are to be pro-Israel, you need to share some of our values, okay? And security is one of those values. Self-preservation is one of those values. Now, if we can, I guess, argue, right, whether Iron Dome is, the way to secure Israel's borders or preserve Israel, right? I happen to think that that's a pretty easy way of doing it. All we had to do
Yeah.
is look at the last conflict and talk about the what a asymmetrical war that was, largely because we had the technology and they didn't,
Right.
right? Um,
Can,
you know,
can I just, we have some friends of ours watching, and I just want to bring them up because they're making some really interesting points. So Marty is asking, and I think he's right on here, right? Well, actually, Marty, I don't want to read into this. The way I'm reading it is, has there ever been a major party president candidate this century who has not been pro-Israel? That is to say, right, that haven't they all been? Maybe that wasn't your inflection, Marty, when you were writing that. But
yeah, I think and this I learned from another my Hartman teachers from Yossi Klein Halevi. All right, when did pro-Israel um, become a thing in American society? Okay, it wasn't until the 6 Day War. Okay, when America, right, said, and in this case, President Nixon, right, said, we have strategic potential in this area, right? And Israel is obviously able to help us, right? But prior to that, yes, Truman certainly supported the creation of the state of Israel, but that it's only at the point where America and its politicians said, wait, there's some strategic advantage. Now, I actually think that that's problematic, okay? Because there's another piece in Yevamot, actually a little bit earlier in the tractate Babylonian tractate Yevamot, all right, that talks about conversion and converting due to force. And they say fear of lions, like if you're either going to convert or get eaten by a lion, or based on a dream, or people who converted in the time of Mordecai and Esther. And now, what was so great about Mordecai and Esther? Well, it was a time when everybody feared Israel, feared the Jews. Okay, that if you're converting because of fear, you're converting because you didn't really, some dream, right? That those aren't real converts. Only when you convert at a time when Jews are in exile, when there's no material benefit. Okay, so I have a concern about people who convert or politicians who are pro-Israel because they're getting something out of it.
Yes, right. And but I'll say that I wonder if AIPAC's move, and this is probably a dig against most PACs and super PACs, is that what politicians may be getting out of being pro-Israel now is a lot of money. Carol is watching, and she said that she finds it really concerning, right? That AIPAC is educational for lawmakers, that we're not going to know where the dollars are going to go. And I would add to that, based on what you just said, that there's a new perk in town now for being pro-Israel, as however AIPAC decides to define that, and that is you're going to get money.
Right. And does that in some way taint
right
the yeah
right Marty's asking right, it's not how do you define it, it's how will AIPAC define it. Yeah,
of course. And I imagine that they will be a little less sort of 30,000 foot and start to say, hey, these are the things that we want to accomplish. And in order for you to get our support, we want to make sure that those, Go ahead.
I just wanted to throw something else in. There was an op-ed in the Jerusalem Post by Douglas Bloomfield. Actually, just came out yesterday, and he made what I thought was a really interesting set of arguments. And one of the fundamental pieces is that let's for the moment assume that most Jews are pro-Israel, whatever that means.
I think that's true.
Right.
About somewhere 80%.
Okay. Most Jews are also pretty liberal. And so in this article, he points out that to support politicians who are pro-Israel, but in many other ways are very not liberal, the suggestion is that should rub us the wrong way. That we should not, or that AIPAC, I should say, should not, as a Jewish, maybe I shouldn't say they're not a Jewish organization. We as Jews who are part of AIPAC should perhaps be concerned that we're going to be supporting people who on one issue are in alignment with us, but on every other issue are in a completely different place.
I get that, right? But if we are going to wait, right, for someone to be completely aligned, right, with even the overwhelming majority, I think we're going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah, it won't happen.
I think we have to be willing to say, I agree with you in certain respects, and I disagree with you in other respects.
Yeah. Maxine, no relation, writes, does having a PAC dilute the educational aspect? That's an interesting question. They took the head of their political wing, I believe. I'm looking for his name right now, but I'm not sure I'm going to find it. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to find it right now. But they took two pretty significant folks to run these new PACs. So one of them is forgive me, I'm not being able to find their names right now. Here we go. Marilyn Rosenthal. She has been in charge of outreach to progressives, is going to be in charge of the PAC, which can give up to $5,000. The Super PAC is going to be run by Rob Bassin. Forgive me, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, the group's longtime political director. So if we take two folks who've had major roles in perhaps some of the educational or political aspects of AIPAC, how is this shift going to impact that core work that they've been doing for so many decades and that has been so important to us?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it will be an interesting thing to watch, and I think that there may be consequences that are unintended or not thought about or not anticipated.
Yeah.
We don't know.
By the way, you said before, you talked about the sort of the kavanah behind politicians being pro-Israel, right? And that if they're doing it for their own sake, for their own benefit, then that's not really, that's not what we're looking for. And I mentioned at the top of the show former President Trump, and so I just want to, because I think this is a good example of what you were talking about. Former President Trump in a recent interview, they were closest of allies, and then he got very angry. He is asked by the interviewer, "Have you spoken?" He says, "I haven't spoken to him since," and I'll tell you the since in a moment. Trump said of the former Israeli prime minister, and then the expletive. The reason that he's so upset is that he says the first person, this is former President Trump, the first person that congratulated Biden was Bibi Netanyahu, the man that I did more for than any other person I dealt with. Bibi could have stayed quiet. He has made a terrible mistake. So I have to wonder, Trump was hailed as very pro-Israel, and I think he did a lot of good things for Israel. But was that really just about him, as, forgive me, most things are?
Yeah, I think that this was, as long as you're doing things for me, then I'll support you, and otherwise, F off.
Yeah.
And I don't want politicians to be friends when it's in their interest or when times are good. All right. Being pro-Israel is putting something on the table when you don't have to. Okay. When you're not getting something out of it, okay? And whether he believes that he won the election or didn't win the election, if he cared about Israel, okay, of course he's going to want America to have a deep and abiding friendship with Israel, and so it should be expected on Trump's part that Netanyahu would, of course, be there and reach out and congratulate the new president, because that's what politicians do. That's what friends do. Right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't Netanyahu, I am a friend of President Trump and President Trump only. I am a friend to America, and America chose a different leader. And so therefore, in the same way as you asked of me, that there are going to be leaders in Israel that I'm not going to agree with, right? And I'm still going to be supportive of Israel. I'm still going to travel there. I'm still going to stand up and shout from the rooftop when I disagree. Okay? I would want the same.
Yeah. I want to thank Darren for offering some clarification, not only on who's going to lead these, but that the super PACs have unlimited spending, but they I don't know if it's aren't supposed to, or if they actually don't give directly to candidates, whereas the PACs can give directly to candidates. And lastly, Rabbi, and I'll give you the last word after this, but first of all, Carol and Darren and Marty and Christo and everyone who's watching and engaging. Thank you. This is so much more fun for us.
Way more fun
when we hear your voices and when you ask questions and when you put your thoughts in. So come back, share it, keep it up. Fantastic. And Carol asks if maybe we want to reach out to someone from APAC to talk a little bit with us about this new stance, this new direction. What do you think?
I think it'd be great. It'd be terrific.
It's a great idea. I think both of us probably know a few people over at APAC. We can certainly APAC down here in Florida. We can reach out. Rabbi, I'm being aware of your time. Last thoughts or things we left off, or
well, I think the notion of taking Israel's security seriously, having a profound friendship with Israel, and not idealizing Israel are all good preconditions. I did want to just acknowledge that I think being pro-Israel is part of an internal Jewish conversation that may show some difference if we are talking to American Jews or if we're talking to Israeli Jews. That when it comes to security, American Jews have multiple allegiances. Israeli Jews only have one. Okay, it's security of their own state, and that how we live out our Judaism is going to be different whether we are in the diaspora or whether we're in the land of Israel. That American Jews certainly see Tikkun Olam as at the top of their list, and so to emphasize things like equality and human rights might lead us to different conclusions than Israelis who put security at the top of their list, and therefore may look at what's going on with the Palestinians in a very different way. So I just want to acknowledge that we can stand here in the United States and talk about how we want our American politicians to be pro-Israel, but that I acknowledge that there may be some differences when it comes to things that the specific issues, maybe things like Iran or the nature of Israel's asymmetrical wars, or how to navigate the Palestinian situation, that those are going to be looked at differently across the pond.
Yeah, absolutely. Rabbi, there's something else that we should mention before we go that I completely missed, but you brought to my attention that not this episode, but was it the last episode?
Yes, the last one.
The last episode was 1 full year of us doing face-to-face, which is kind of cool.
So,
that's worth celebrating.
That is absolutely worth celebrating. And as I put on my Facebook post when I was publicizing this, I never thought, hi, Heather, that I never thought that I was a video podcast type of guy or video podcast kind of rabbi. But I have come to love this, and I think it's a valuable part of my rabbinate. It's a way of getting my thinking out there. I want to particularly acknowledge my teachers, like Danielle Hartman and Yossi Klein Halevi, Alana Steinhain from the Hartman Institute, who really so much of what I was thinking about today and shared with you are B'Shem Rehem, Omram, in their words, they were guiding me in this. So thank you to them.
Amazing.
And thank you, Rabbi David, for
you are so welcome. Yeah, by the way, if any of you really do want to do some deep learning about Israel, about anything, but Israel in particular, the Hartman Institute is an amazing, amazing resource of
Right.
learning.
And
Just fantastic.
as we are celebrating our 1 year and heading into our next year, if you are watching this now or you're watching it in the future, and you want to offer up an idea about what you'd like for us to talk about, we're very happy and
Yeah.
very willing to receive those. You can reach us at Temple Sinai.
Or just
Thank you
leave it
very
in
much.
or just leave it in the comments. I was actually
That's right.
literally just going to say that. I was just going to say
Yeah.
that. Absolutely. Let us know what you'd like us to talk. We are not going to be here next week, and we're not going to be here the week after because we do this on the 2nd and the 4th, and this is one of those weird months with 5 weeks in it. So we actually have a 2-week break. We'll be back on January 13th. Until then, Happy New Year, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom. Bye.
Watch them.